Gisèle Pelicot today stood brave and strong outside the French court which jailed her former husband and 50 other men who were convicted of sexual assault. She thanked her many supporters and told other survivors of abuse that they share the same fight. Her ex-husband, Dominique Pelicot, was sentenced to 20 years in jail for drugging and raping her and inviting strangers to their house to abuse her. 50 other men were convicted and jailed for the attacks, which took place over more than a decade. It followed a landmark trial which shocked France and the world. And a warning that this report from Chloe Keedy contains details of the abuse that you may find upsetting.
After a trial that has horrified the world, it's the heroism of one woman that history will remember. This morning, for a final time, Gisèle Pelicot carried herself calmly into court to face the unimaginable. A room filled with dozens of men who raped her while she lay unconscious. And at the centre of it all, her husband, Dominique Pelicot. He cried as he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for repeatedly drugging and raping his wife and inviting strangers to join in. When it was over, the woman who waived her anonymity so that this trial could be heard by the world walked out with her children and grandchildren. It was for them, she said, that she had led this fight.
J'ai voulu, en ouvrant les portes de ce procès le 2 septembre dernier, que la société puisse se saisir des débats qui s'y sont tenus. Je n'ai jamais regretté cette décision. J'ai confiance, à présent, en notre capacité à saisir collectivement un avenir dans lequel chacun, femmes et hommes, puisse vivre en harmonie, dans le respect et la compréhension mutuelle.
The other 50 men found guilty of rape or sexual assault were told to come to court with an overnight bag. Some kissed goodbye to their wives and girlfriends before they went in. Many had tried to blame Dominique Pelicot for their own part, a man who played the doting husband, while for a decade he drugged his wife with sedatives, slipped into her food and drink. The couple retired to this peaceful village in Provence in 2013. Gisèle Pelicot said she thought they had the perfect life, but it was here that her husband began inviting dozens of strangers into their home. The 50 were described in court as Mr. Everyman. There was Redouane, a 55-year-old nurse, now serving 8 years in prison for aggravated rape. Ahmed, a plumber and father of 3, also sentenced to 8 years. Jean-Marc, a 74-year-old grandfather, given a 6-year sentence. And Joanne, a soldier and the youngest on trial. He was aged 22 at the time and will now spend the next 10 years in jail. Most lived within 30 miles of the village of Mazon, but Dominique Pelicot met them online. He used a chat room called Without Her Knowledge and sent messages such as, "Do you want me to abuse her in front of you? You come by and I'll drug her at dinner. You're like me. You like rape mode." Dominique Pelicot's deceit was only discovered when he was caught filming underneath women's skirts in a supermarket. The security guard who stopped him called the police. Their investigation led them to Mr. Pelicot's laptop, where they found thousands of graphic photos and videos in a folder entitled Abuse. The case and the courage of Gisèle Pelicot has prompted a national moment of reckoning for France. She is the woman that told the world that it was time for shame to switch sides. But at the end of this trial, one of many unanswered questions is whether France will remember those words. Chloe Keedy, ITV News, Avignon.
The courage of Gisèle Pelicot throughout the trial has raised hopes it could be a turning point in tackling abuse against women. Her bravery in identifying herself and having the case heard in public challenged the stigma facing survivors. It also sparked national debate, protests and campaigns to change the law. Our correspondent Rachel Townsend heard the reaction in Paris.
Dominique Pelicot
leading news bulletins across France today was one story. Justice for Gisèle Pelicot, a survivor whose bravery has touched millions around the world. There has been huge global demand for this tragic story, impacting not only viewers but journalists too.
I had teams on the ground covering it in French, Arabic, Spanish and English. And for all of them, it has changed something. They say we're not the same anymore. At France 24, we have a psychologist who normally deal with people coming from the front line, wars, tension zones and so on. But in these cases too, they can go and talk to them.
Emotions echoed by the tens of thousands who've protested for months, demanding more measures to tackle sexual violence against women. Among them, Capucine, who suffered years of abuse as a teenager. Shame stopped her speaking out until now.
As a teenager, I would have loved to have figures of strong women who say, I recovered, so you can recover. We often tell little girls that if a little boy is not nice with them, it's because they like her.
And challenging a culture where people still defend rape is not easy. Kevin Grosset helps youngsters understand healthy relationships. He says they are often not the problem.
Et il y a des adolescentes de 12-13 ans qui me disent que y a des adultes en fait qui leur envoient des messages avec des propositions complètement indécentes et que l'éducation des jeunes garçons c'est une étape mais que ça ne règle pas le problème que la plupart des problèmes sont liés à des adultes qui sont déjà éduqués.
Perhaps now, thanks to one woman's extraordinary bravery, people will confront the horror of sexual violence and no longer look away. Rachel Townsend, ITV News, Paris.
OK, let's talk to Chloe, who's still in Avignon in southern France for us tonight. Chloe, there is so much hope, isn't there, that this case could bring some sort of lasting change in France?
Hope, yes, and some momentum, but this is a case that has shaken and shocked France to its very core. There are tonight 50 men, apart from Dominique Pelicot, who have been convicted, but the sentences they received, which ranged from 3 to 15 years, were in many cases well below what prosecutors asked for. And I understand that Gisèle Pelicot's children are disappointed with those sentences. I also understand from speaking to lawyers for those men that many of them do intend to appeal. That is also Dominique Pelicot's right, but he is now also being investigated for his links to other crimes. The rape and murder, a rape and murder in Paris in 1991 and an attempted rape in 1999. Those are cold cases that detectives have now reopened. So I think in many ways, Charlene, this trial has raised more questions than it has answers. And one of the most disturbing of those, perhaps, and I know this from speaking to people here, is that if Dominique Pelicot was able to recruit that many men from a relatively small area of France, how many more could be out there?